How you doing? I'm going to talk to you about something a little bit different from our previous two presentations. So first of all, my name is Tash, and I set up a human behaviour agency about 4 years ago. And there was a really simple premise to really why I went through the pain and absolute not glamorous world of setting up a business. And that is this, which is human behaviour is fascinating and research isn't. It's really simple, research isn't. But that's a really big problem. And I'm here to talk to you about one thing that I believe is super important if you guys are going to put together compelling and really insightful digital marketing strategies. In fact, forget the word digital, just marketing strategies that work and that are useful and usable, particularly to your consumers, and that is so important. And that one thing is this, and it's people. And of course, I would say that because I work in human behaviour. But the thing that I think we can all recognise is that the downside of not really understanding these guys, not really understanding the people in this room, your neighbour maybe, the people that you want to influence on your brand, is this. I think in the last 24 hours, maybe this year in fact, we have had the most profound examples of unexpected consequences of not really understanding people that we want to influence. This has been surprising to many people, I think, probably. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is one specific type of people that I believe are underrepresented and in fact just downright misunderstood, and that I think people, particularly probably in this room and in London specifically, don't necessarily get. And that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Now, there are a few things to establish just up front. I'm going to tell you some personal stuff here. I'm 33 years old, and I am bang in the middle of averages in the whole of marketing land. I am 7 years older than an average brand manager, who's around 25, and I'm 7 years younger than an average marketing manager, who's around 40. And the one thing that we all have in common in this world of averageness that we all live in marketing is this. If I were to say to you, over 65s, what would you likely say? Anyone hazard to shout out?
Retired. Retired.
Silver surfers? I think that would be really positive.
Word is original.
Nice. Word is original. Now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting to the real heart of the matter here. I'm just going to give you a snippet of the kinds of things that when I've done my own research, people in the marketing community have said. They said stuff like heating bills, old people, Zimmer frames, the war, pity, sorrow, grumpy old men, death. And that is what we ultimately are confronted with. Because as young marketeers, looking at people of the age of 65 and over is to confront our own mortality. And that is uncomfortable. And I think we would rather not, quite frankly. Now, the reason that I'm talking to you about this today is because I run a research business and we predominantly use digital techniques. And last year, I got asked approximately 486 times, yeah, but old people aren't really on the internet, are they? Now, this might sound astounding, but as a business owner, trying to work with people in a digital community, this is really, really challenging. Now, what I did on the back of this is to go and do a bit of work to understand what exactly these people are all about, so that we can share that information and absolutely start to work with them in a different way. So that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. It is baby boomers and how they should become the focus of your digital marketing strategies. Now, for those of you who are less familiar with baby boomers, they are people born between the years 1946 and 1964. They are 52 to 70 years old. I think the one absolutely most compelling piece of evidence that I can give to you today is that the term old people, quite frankly, just doesn't cut it. So if we can ban that from the vernacular, I think we'll be in a good place next year. Now, if you've ever been stopped on the street or asked to conduct a survey, or even somebody from the electoral register has come round, what you'll start to notice is one of the first questions you get asked is what age bracket do you fit in? And what you'll notice that we've got some nice brackets going on up here. 18 to 24, good, that's only for years, that's 6 years. Then you've got, yeah, another small bracket there. By the time you get to 50 to 64 or 65 plus, you are being lumped into one horrible, homogeneous mass. And if we look at that versus previous generations, we are wrongly lumping them together. This is a really broad expanse of people that we're grouping under one horrible stereotype. 65 years separates this group. At the oldest end of the spectrum, at the youngest end of the spectrum, that is 65 years. 65 years and one horribly big stereotype, which is this, quite frankly. The blue rinse brigade, your granny, old people. Those three probably most commonly used phrases when we come to the idea of baby boomers, and that is wrong. But there is a bigger problem at work here than simple stereotyping. While stereotyping is uncomfortable, we don't like it, it's not particularly PC, that's fine to some degree. The really big problem here is that society is changing. Now, I'm going to give you a slightly kind of scientific approach to this, I guess, for 1 minute, just to explain why this is such a big problem and why you should be paying much more attention to it. Now, as a society, we always historically used to be a pyramid shape. And that predominantly meant that we were dying younger, fundamentally, and being born in greater numbers. So you can start to see the pyramid effect happening here. Now, what you can see over time is that by 2020, we're moving to a dome shape. So as the world population reaches 7.7 billion, we end up with this shape, which is far more like a dome. By 2080, we are going to be like a skyscraper. So for the first time in history, there will be as many older people as younger people. We are living much, much longer, and we are not being born in enough proportions by result. Now, the interesting thing about this is that this is the first time in history that this has ever happened. And that's a fascinating time to live in. In fact, if you look at figures in the US they will reach generational parity within 1% by 2020. That is literally just around the corner. And all of this group of older people have far more influence now than they have ever done. And you only have to look at things like Brexit and Donald Trump to start to see some of the effects of this much more significantly influential audience, and one who you should be really paying attention to. So, whilst the marketing world is obsessed with chasing all these bright young things out there, we are missing a trick. This grey, shiny world that is out there are being left at the peripheries, and that is wrong. Now, on your seats, this is a digital conference, so we're going to go really digital here. You have a card. I'd like you to hold it up. Great. So if we just do a quick bit of user testing, if everyone can hold their cards up so I know that you understand how to use it. On the front you have myth, and on the back you have fact. I'm going to start with the first myth or fact. Okay, older people are technophobes. Who thinks that that's a myth and who thinks that that's a fact? It's an easy one to slide you in there. Okay, of course that is a myth. People were technophobes when technology was difficult to use, but technology has been democratized. We've been talking an awful lot about things like virtual reality, audio commands, things like Siri. All of these things have made it incredibly easy, not for older people, but for any person to use technology. And that is profoundly true. Your gran is just as likely to have an iPad as you are. In fact, she probably has two. Now, when we did our studies, just 2% of the people that we conducted our surveys with claimed to actively dislike technology. That's a really small percentage. And I think actually you would find, if you compared that to younger generations, that figure would go up. So these guys are much more predisposed towards technology than you might imagine. And it's not really that surprising, because if you imagine the generations that they have grown up with, they have witnessed many different pieces of innovation, from the advent of the internet to personal computers and mobile phone technology. It's not that surprising because they also invented it. If we think of these guys, Steve Jobs, Tim Berners-Lee, Bill Gates, these guys are baby boomers. And the people that we talked to were actively interested in technology. They didn't reject it, they wanted more of it. I'm just going to play you a short video of a couple of our respondents who will just, I guess, inform you as to how excited they are about technology.
Actually, I was quite impressed with this Fitbit. when I saw it, and I'd only heard of Fitbits about a week before in passing on Twitter. So I was quite interested to see what it was, and it does look it's very attractive. I'm seeing how it went. On the other hand, I see that Apple have an Apple Watch that probably does something similar. So I might have been more tempted by that.
I discovered Amazon many years ago, and I've been amazed at the way they've managed to develop their customer service and invest in the brand. The actual site is so user-friendly. It really is now the best online shopping experience. As much the same applies to Apple. I had one of the first Apple II computers in 1983. I still relish opening any new Apple product because the experience is really second to none. So every time I buy a new iPhone or an iPad or a computer, I think that's the thing that I probably look forward most to.
So that is brilliant, isn't it? Because they are using language that we are, experiences. They're relishing the idea of this new sexy technology that's going to make Fitbits suddenly so exciting. And you can see that every time you talk to them. So this is Paul saying, I'm not worried at all about technology. In fact, I'm very excited by it. Having been a child of the 50s, I've seen so many amazing technology changes in my life, so I try and embrace every new technology as soon as it becomes available. And that is absolutely what we see with most baby boomers that we talk to. What is fair to say is that they have a different relationship with social media. So for those of you thinking of targeting these guys with your social media, then they absolutely do have a different relationship with than other generations. So if I hold up these three words, fearful, hesitant and cautious, who do you imagine those might belong to?
Parents.
Say that again?
Parents.
Nope. Yeah, I think we're getting closer to the answer over here. This is Gen Z. Let me introduce to you the most cautious generation and the youngest generation. Okay, so if we hear language that these guys might say, you can't control who views your posts, and this means that things can go viral and things can be taken out of context. And you only have to look at the way that they use social media to really start to understand this. They are far more conscious of the pitfalls and the downsides to what happens when you basically mess up on social media. It goes very badly wrong. For those of you who are familiar with Justine Sacco, anyone heard of Justine Sacco in this room? A handful. She basically posted something on Twitter that said something along the lines of, going to South Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, only kidding, I'm white. And she was basically sacked immediately. That is just one example, but there are many more of these guys being super familiar with what happens when you basically fuck up on social media. It goes very badly wrong. So as a result of that, they're far more cautious than you might imagine, despite their youthful age. And again, you only have to look at the number of different types of platforms that these guys are using for you to really understand that. Because if you look at just how many platforms there are, yes, some people will be using 3, but a lot of the people that we spoke to were using up to 6 or 7 different platforms. And just look how many followers they've got. They've got 150, 250, 500, 700. This is a full-time social media management course here. This is not just something you're doing in your spare time, but these guys are doing that on a daily basis. It's a full-time job and it's lots of pressure. Now, if we compare that to our baby boomers, these guys have got probably much more limited usage of social media, maybe 3 accounts, maybe even only 1. But what's really interesting is if you look at the number of people that they're either following or in touch with, it's much more limited. And for them, that's a really good thing, because you know what? They actually know those people. So for all of us in this room with big followings, who the hell do you know out of those people? Hardly any of them. These guys have genuine relationships with those people, and so the way they use social media is far less pressurised, much more free-spirited. Quite frankly, they will post anything and use it in a far more gregarious fashion than you might find with a Gen Zer. And I only have to show you one of my mother's WhatsApp posts to me for you to understand that. She constantly WhatsApps me, probably I'd say 10 or 15 times a day, and what you'll notice is that my responses get increasingly short and curt, and hers get increasingly longer and longer. as she tries to engage with me. She loves this kind of stuff, and she is a classic baby boomer. Which brings me on to my second myth or fact. So are we ready with our cards? Ready with our cards? Okay, second myth or fact. Older people are isolated and harder to communicate with. I think we are getting the gist of this. Absolutely, it is a myth. That is just not true. So this is Joy, this year being able to share others' experiences through photographic records posted on Facebook, Instagram, etc. It's brilliant for families and keeps them close. In a wider context, people from around the globe can be more connected through their shared interests. The concept is huge. Thanks, Joy. The concept is huge here. These guys really, really enjoy the connectivity that social media provides them. And you can see that when we look at penetration figures for Facebook. So amongst 50 to 59-year-olds, penetration of Facebook is 68%. When we move up to 62 to 69-year-olds, it's 62%. And over 70s, it's still over 50%. It's a big number. More than half the population of over 70s are on Facebook. And that is not just true of Facebook, it is true of probably the top 3 accounts that they're using. Instagram and Pinterest also being 2 really popular ones. Now, connectivity, I think, is a really, really valuable asset for baby boomers. And you can start to see that in some of the content being produced by some of the top platforms really directing content towards baby boomers. I will direct you towards Stitch, which is a brand from the States. Stitch is a companionship website which just simply puts you together with people that you might want to pop out for dinner with, or go to on a shopping trip, or in fact go on a holiday. Stitch, all designed for the over 55s. Then we have Netflix, who are actively producing content for the first time ever, specifically directed towards baby boomers. So for those of you that have ever seen Grace and Frankie, that's one of their pieces of content directly activated towards baby boomers. And then lastly, we also have Lyft, again a service from the States, a bit similar to Uber. Lyft is connecting people with lifts, basically, allowing them to go shopping, go to hospital appointments, doctor's appointments, or even just to see friends. But the one thing that you can see with all of this is that connectedness is fundamentally this really strong brand benefit that these guys are actively willing to pay more money for. And it's weird because the idea of connectedness is often reserved for younger people, but actually, I think if anything, they're harder to reach. So if we look at one quote from Alice, who's a Gen Zer, saying, I FaceTime my friends whilst also working on my laptop. Also, I sometimes might FaceTime my friend whilst watching a film at the same time. It's like we're virtually together. And this idea of media stacking amongst younger populations clearly is evident. I'm sure you're all really conscious of it. It basically means they are wading through content in a way that means it's almost impossible to be visible. For baby boomers, that is just simply not the case. So whilst Gen Z are kind of virtually getting together, baby boomers are doing that as well, but they're also physically getting together. So that idea of word of mouth, of talking to one another, is still really evident for this generation. So here we have Maggie saying, I also go for walks with Jennifer every Saturday and see my friend Claire weekly, because we're writing something together. I have friends around for dinner or go to theirs every week. So this idea of how you can connect with people is far more evident with an older audience, because they're simply making more connections themselves. Which brings me on to one of my last points, and I think this probably, hopefully, really rams home the point in terms of how our relationships with baby boomers have been defined and perhaps misrepresented. And I'll draw you to this piece of information, which is from the ONS, which is that 1 in 10 baby boomers in 2011 got divorced. In fact, it was something around 9%, which is very high versus other generations. So baby boomers are increasingly free to play the field, which is also substantiated by this, which is that the number of STIs among 50 to 90-year-olds has doubled in 10 years. That is not even the worst of it. If you consult figures from the HPA, they've suggested that 45 to 64-year-olds had the highest rise in syphilis, herpes, genital warts, and chlamydia of any generation. So these guys are actively playing the field and getting together in a very meaningful way. So that brings me to my conclusion, which is that if we compare Gen Z, or millennials, you could probably put them in that camp as well, which are the classic, exciting audience for most marketers to deal with, and baby boomers, we've got it wrong, guys. We've got this seriously wrong, because if we look at, fundamentally, the kinds of things that we would assume are baby boomers, nostalgic, fearful, really concerned about technology, probably really adverse to technology. And then we go Gen Z, self-assured, really adventurous, really excited about the possibilities of new tech. It's the other way around. It is literally the other way around. We have a baby boomer audience who are much more self-assured, much more adventurous and open to new experiences, and are actively seeking out new technology experiences. And on the other hand, we have Gen Z who absolutely are nostalgic for a world that they never had, who are fearful of the future because they've not got one, and who are really concerned about the implications of technology. It's a scary time. We're going to switch our audiences here. Now, just as a final bit of evidence, who here is part of Generation Rent? Or has been? Probably everyone at some point here. You fortunate audience. I think hardly anyone raised their hands, so we must be all incredibly wealthy in this room. I'll tell you who isn't part of Generation Rent, and that is baby boomers. And these are a group of people who are utterly unencumbered by financial constraints. In the UK, on a weekly basis, they spend £2.2 billion on goods and services. It's a big figure. It's lots of money. It's much more disposable income than our Gen Zers or our millennials. And what is an absolute fact is that brands and advertisers are guilty of ignoring these guys. Clearly evident in almost every walk of life. I'll give you one example. TV networks historically charged advertisers a premium, that's a premium, to reach 18 to 49-year-olds. That was really clear. What they also did at the same time was to discount older audiences, making older audiences virtually without value to TV networks. So if you were to compare 3 big shows from the States with their average ages of their audience viewers and then the average cost per acquisition of media spend, so we've got at the top end here, we've got The Good Wife. So the average age of their typical audience is 55 years and the cost per acquisition is $25 per 1,000 views. And then if you compare that to things like American Idol or Glee, who have far younger audience ages, what we can see is that the cost goes up exponentially to $47 per 1,000 views. There is clearly ageism going on here, and we are clearly ignoring this audience. We need to absolutely get beyond the labels, and we need to start really thinking about these guys, because there are many more of them, and there will be many more of them in the future, and we really aren't considering how they are living their lives. In this world, the grey pound may as well be the dull pound. We need to start thinking about these guys in a new, grey and shiny way, rather than this kind of dull way that we're doing at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, that was really awesome. Do we have any questions from the audience?
It's not so much the question as you've almost like nailed it on the head of like my mum and Amazon and her Waitrose shop and things like that. Every week she'll order the same stuff and she doesn't need it. Like we have like a 5 bowl of meat. It's just it's on the same
That is
menu.
an observation into your mother's life there.
Yeah. It's like she totally loves it all. She's constantly sending us me links to websites that I haven't been to say like, oh, buy this or have a look at this or do you want to go there, and like she has 2 iPads as well because she bought a new one and she buys one for her
Why not?
friend. She just buys one for her
Yeah,
friend.
no, I'm with you. They have time, they have money, and they have excitement and enthusiasm. This is an audience that you should be biting your arm off to be working with, and at the moment, very few people are. And so there is a rich, untapped world of insight out there that I think everyone can take much more opportunity of.
You were kind of saying how, obviously, older generation tends to have to work on social media with a much smaller network. We're kind of used to utilising the fact that people kind of click very quickly onto adding new people. How do you break into that potentially?
With the number of people that they
That they follow or that they're friends with? Or
I think in terms of how you break into that, I mean, I think we raised a couple of points earlier that I think were really interesting. I think Camilla particularly raised this. This world of micro-influencers, I think for baby boomers, is particularly relevant. These guys absolutely trust one another and they trust their own opinion, and I think probably in my dealings with them as an audience, they are strident in their viewpoints. They will absolutely recommend something and they will tear you to shreds if they don't believe in it also. So the world of micro-influencers I think is really interesting here because it's a really interesting way of gaining their trust. They're quite sceptical, I think, about probably that celebrity, big influencer world that probably has become so de rigueur in most marketing right now. So I would go smaller and much more intimate.
Do you know if they're entrepreneurial? If they're sort of like, maybe they want to found something or...
Yeah, I think
Need
that's
a
a really
business
interesting
plan there?
point. I think what we increasingly see is that whilst historically our stereotype of baby boomers is that you get to 65 and have 3 years before you die, now you get to 65 and you maybe have 30 or 40 years to live, and I think it's a very different mentality. So businesses are one thing, entrepreneurship is absolutely relevant. The other thing is just how many interests they have. If you look at a Gen Zer or a millennial, and if I was to introduce you or you were to introduce yourself to me, I bet the first thing you would say is what you do. It kind of defines us. We're kind of a walking CV. For baby boomers, their life is their personal interests, and so it's much more likely to be something that they're doing in the garden or with their friends or with a group that they are actively participating in. But there are lots and lots of them. So rather than just the 1 or 2 things that probably you and I participate in, these guys probably have a list of 10 interests that they're following. So again, it offers new avenues and ways of connecting with them in a much more meaningful fashion.
Thank you.
Yes.
Off the back of this evening, it sounds like there's a real space for real marketing space for personalised lingerie aimed at the over 65.
I'm afraid I've already TM'd that, so yes, I would entirely agree with you. In fact, we're running an event next week with the Age of No Retirement, who are a charitable organisation specifically around that more intimate space, to understand that it is a very viable space, in fact, and something that's very exciting, and again, something they're really willing to spend money on. So yes, I would entirely agree with you.
I was just thinking about my mother, who's very, very into all the social networking stuff.
Are you going to say something different then?
Oh God. Well, she's a widow, so you can tell her. There was, is there like a love space for the older generation? So she's found like a group on Facebook. She loves to write, she's very creative. And they all write and they're all going to meet up and they share each other's work. And it's that kind of thing, but she'd love that. She's very interested.
Yeah, absolutely. There are smaller pools of influential people who are operating in those spaces, definitely. They tend to be driven by their interest areas. So I guess probably versus our broader, more lifestyle-orientated bloggers that we might see at a millennial kind of end, these guys tend to be much more driven by their interests and their pursuits, so it tends to be a bit more structured. But equally, if you look at sites like Stitch is one of those sites which helps people connect, so I'd highly recommend her having a look. It's much more US orientated, but they do have UK offshoots within that, definitely.
Thank you.
Yes?
What if your product or brand is seen as a young person's product or brand? How do you break out of that?
I don't think that's a problem. I'll give you one example. So there was a leisure centre, this is quite specific, but I think relevant. There was a leisure centre in the north of England who were trying to attract the over 65s to an aerobics class because they knew that people in their community needed to do more aerobics, quite frankly. And they knew that it was a facility that would be attractive to them. It was free, and they expected a big class turnout. No one came. And they advertised it to the over 65s. So they decided to broaden it because they thought, hey, maybe some 40-year-olds will want to come. And they labelled it, please come along to the over 45s aerobic class. And the next week, it was absolutely full, and there wasn't a single person under the age of 65 in there. So it's all about positioning. It's all about making people feel included. And it's about removing that stereotype and that horrible badge of old people. I think this is not about creating marketing which is designed towards old people. This is about creating marketing which is relevant to people who still have plenty of life to live and who are excited to share stuff. So I think it's really about positioning and how you talk to them, definitely.
Where do they advertise?
Say that again?
Where do they advertise?
Where did they advertise? They advertise in their local community paper. Radio, I would say, would be a great media channel for this audience.